Hey, hello everybody. Welcome back. I just wanted to answer a question from some of you on social media. You asked, how did I get to this point with this image here? And this is actually a snapshot from the slicer I have for my 3D printer. It's a program that you build the scaffold with, and it sets it up for resin printing. So this episode, I want to go through my workflow for my character design, and I'm going to try and make it as quick as possible because I don't have that much time on YouTube, so I want to try and keep it as short and sweet as possible. So I'm just going to quickly take you through the process, how I design at the computer, and then on to working with the clay in the studio. So let me just get rid of this. So I just like to open up a drawing program. You can choose whichever one is best for you. I just like to use a marker, and I drop the saturation down on the layer, the opacity. I just take it down, and then I'll just start sketching to warm up, just to get a funny shape of a character. And keeping in mind, this is of course for our little fisherman, and he is encountering a problem with some graffiti. That is the story in the script anyways. So he's gonna paint over some graffiti, so he's got a paint bucket and a brush. That's in the script. So when I'm designing, I've got that stuck in my mind, that he's kind of having to do a task that he doesn't really want to do, and I want his body language to reflect that. So I'll come up with a nice idea or something I'm happy with. Then I'll go to the workshop, I'll sculpt it out in clay, and then I'll photograph it, and I'll take the photographs back into the computer, and I'll take it into a program like ZBrush, and then I'll do a very detailed sculpt in ZBrush. And that will also allow me to start setting up the design of the armature that's going to be basically the skeleton of the character. So for now, we're just going to focus on the design process, sketching and sculpting in clay, and then I think I'm going to have to cover the rest in another episode. So I'm just going to get right into it now. And I'll just keep running through until I start to get comfortable. For the sake of this episode, I'm gonna go quite quickly, but you can really sit all day long and work on these sketches in incredible detail. But the good thing is to just be loose about it, let the line work do the talking. And don't get too fixated on making a finished drawing yet. You want to get a good gestural drawing going. So then I'll basically work them down. I'll start very rough, and then I'll start to clarify the lines I've made so far. And each time I go in, I get more and more detail. I go more and more into detail, I should say. So, and that's what I'll do. I'll just keep working it until I'm comfortable with the final result. And so we'll print that out. I think you get the idea. So what we'll do is we'll just print out a few different renditions, little sketches like this. I'll kind of collage them all together, and then we'll start sculpting some clay. Okay, so we're going to take this We're gonna print it out, maybe I'll make a few more little examples and then collage them all together, print it out for some basic source material, and then we'll get to sculpting some clay. So I'm gonna shut this down and see you in the studio. I've rigged up the armature with some wire and paper and some wet blocks of wood. I put the wet blocks of wood in there just to keep the clay from cracking so it doesn't dry too quickly, because maybe I'm going to be working on this for a couple of days. Hopefully not. I hope I can get something jammed out for you quite quickly. Just to give you a quick explanation of how I rig up my armature, I basically just have different gauges of wire. You can do it with normal pliers. These are safety wire pliers. They bend the wire so you can kind of lock everything together. Those are quite handy, but you can do it just with a normal pair of pliers. Then I, of course, have some tissue or packing paper. You can use newspaper to pack it in there. And that's just going to take up the volume, so it's just not solid clay. You can do it with the solid clay if you like, but I find that this is a much nicer way to do it. So I like to reuse the clay. So I'll pull the clay back off of this and put it back in the bag and use it again later. So we're just gonna get kind of right to it. I'm gonna start loading the clay onto this and get our little character started. Now what we're gonna do is we're just gonna load up the clay onto the armature. I like to keep the clay in a plastic bag, and I keep it in a sealed pot as well so that it stays nice and soft. And this is just a matter of getting it jammed into all the cracks so that it doesn't move around. We're having some cold temperatures here, and as you can see by the way I'm dressed, this clay is like ice. One thing I want to be sure to do is keep the clay, as I build it up, to make sure I'm keeping a consistent thickness all the way around. If you start to add too much clay on one side or the other, you're going to kind of lose track of where your armature wire is underneath, and you don't want to be running into that once you start getting into the sculpt. And what we're going for is kind of a caricature, but our caricature is basically comprised of things that are realistic. So the shape of the nose is quite realistic, the shape of the eyes is quite realistic, but the proportions are completely blown out. So it is important to use a resource like Anatomy for Sculptors so that you can see how it is in real life, and then you can abstract it based on those rules that you find within the book. Okay, we've got our clay loaded onto our armature now. And once I get just kind of the basic shape of the skull, I'll stop and refer to my source material. What I like to do is, I'm making a caricature, but I'll keep working and reworking until I find exactly what I want. The intention of these clay sculptures that I make is just to rework and design a character. So I'm not intending ever to keep them, and I really highly encourage you to not, when you're starting out, just keep experimenting. Don't try to make a finished sculpture. Let yourself make mistakes. Don't be afraid to change it, and just remake and remake and remake whatever it is you're doing. And through that process, you will really learn a lot. So what I want to do is I want to create a skull that in my mind's eye, that supports the character that I want to create the best. So my caricature is an old man. He has very large eyes. He's going to have larger eye sockets. And basically, I want to think of the structure underneath. So I'm going to pre-think that out first. And I'm going to lay out the skull as I would imagine it being underneath the skin of my character. And then I'm going to build on top of that. And this character is, I like to tell a story with the character, and not just with the entire character. I like to tell a story with all the individual elements of the character. So you think, okay, he's a fisherman. He spent a lot of time in the sun, so probably wasn't very good at wearing sunscreen, and so he has an extra amount of wrinkles and maybe some cracked skin, but he's a friendly guy. I like to do that with everything. I like to tell a story, even if I'm making something as simple as a telephone pole. I like to make it tell a story. So if you just took a normal telephone pole on the side of the road, it is what it is. But if you all of a sudden have some signs stuck to the pole, maybe some damage to the pole, some missing, my missing cat posts, it starts to tell a story. And I like to do that with everything. On this character, and also he probably wasn't very good at taking care of his teeth, so he's probably missing some teeth. So we're going to take the jaw in a little bit, and probably has a really nice big nose. Okay, I think that's it for today. Let me know in the comments if you want to see more content like this. I really enjoy just having a day of just standing at the armature and sculpting some clay, so I really look forward to hearing from you. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you again in the next episode. Take it easy. Thanks.